श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भाम् नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् यो नित्यम् अच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः।
Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So today we're going to continue with our discussion of Sri Vacana Bhusanam by Pillai Lokacharya with a commentary by Manavalama Munigal. So we're going to pick up where we left off with Sutra 178. So up until now, the last section that we were discussing was about the relationship between the Lord and the individual, and it was about how the individual soul is completely dependent upon the Lord. So here we have this section starting here is a small section about self-reliance. I think that's going to be put to bed very quickly. So here he says, indeed, trying to ensure one's personal welfare without him, the Lord, and that's the most important part of the sutra, is like wrenching a suckling child from its parents and handing it to a murdering butcher. Okay, it's a pretty stark example given here. But what's the point? The point is that if you think that you can be totally self-reliant, right, without the Lord, that's a big mistake. That's a big mistake. So trying to ensure your personal welfare without the Lord. So if you think by doing karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, or even property, because property is a minor upaya, property is a minor means. The real means is actually the Lord. So without the Lord, there is no way to moksha. Right? There is no way to liberation. There's no way to and what do we mean by moksha or liberation? We mean to the service of the Lord in Sri Vaikuntha. So there's no way to get free from samsara without the Lord agreeing to that, without the Lord granting moksha. And so therefore, without the Lord, it's just not possible. So somehow or other, some people, they get this, it's almost a karma kanda idea that if I do something, I chant the japa, I follow the regulations, I do the sacrifice, I do the puja, and I must get a result. God must give me the result, right? I must attain the result. And there's no part of that I need the Lord to actually give me some mercy. So that's the whole idea. So it's a sort of a strange example here, taking away a suckling child from its parents and handing over to a butcher. I think he's just trying to be dramatic here and to give a sort of very dramatic. The next sutra says, thereby the jiva destroys itself. So this is really spiritual suicide, is what he's saying, to consider that you can achieve liberation by your own efforts without the Lord. Now, the difference between Wadagalai and Tengalai, which we talked about before, the northern and southern schools of Sri Vaishnavism, in the northern school, the Kanchi Acharyas, headed by Vedanta Deshika, believe in a type of cooperative grace. So you perform your actions, you perform your duties, you do different duties, even karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, or property. And by doing those, you attract the grace of the Lord, you attract the mercy of the Lord, and he becomes attracted because of you doing those things, and he grants the mercy. So there's a cooperation. And we've mentioned this a lot before. The analogy is Marjala Nyaya, or Marketa Nyaya. Sorry, Marketa Nyaya. Marketa Nyaya means the baby monkey hanging onto the mother monkey, onto the back of the mother monkey when the mother monkey moves. So the baby has to perform some effort. The mother also performs some effort. So it's a cooperative solution, cooperative grace. Whereas the southern school of Sri Vaishnavism, the Tengalai-acharyas of Sri Rangam, headed by Pila Lokacharya and Manavala Mamuni, believe in the causeless grace of the Lord, and that the grace of the Lord has a much greater part to play in the process. And in fact, is really the only thing in the process. So that is called causeless grace, and is symbolized by the logic of the cat and the kitten. The baby kitten just lies there, the cat comes over and picks it up and takes it. The kitten doesn't do anything. So just to enforce the idea, to both of those examples, the Wadagalai and Tengalai examples, right? Both of their ideas of cooperative grace and causeless grace, right? Both involve the Lord giving His grace. So what it's saying here is that if we don't believe at all in the grace of the Lord is necessary, or the Lord is not necessary, if the Lord is not even necessary, if it's only just the Lord says do karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, if you just do those things, right, automatically by your efforts alone, you'll achieve liberation. That is spiritual suicide. That is completely wrong. Seeking to achieve personal well-being by self-effort without reliance upon the Lord leads to self-destruction. Okay? And basically what we were saying, as we were discussing before, it is the height of false ego, right? The height of false ego to think that you can save yourself, right? Okay, so then that's a very short section. So it's pretty easy to understand. Very, very, very starkly given the example. Self-destruction through conceit, arrogance, and sensuality. Okay, so now he's going to talk about different ways the soul can self-destruct. This self-destruction occurs through conceit, arrogance, and elusive sensuality. To apply oneself to achieving well-being through various spiritual and self-improvement techniques without having overcome the ego leads to spiritual materialism. That's an interesting phrase. And self-delusion. The ever subtle ego convinces itself that it has achieved high spiritual states and congratulates itself. And it then evaluates and considers itself more enlightened and evolved than other beings, whom it then disparages and discriminates against in delusive arrogance. It then indulges in sensuality masked as spiritual rewards. Okay, so this is in English what we say, holier than thou attitude. Somebody has a holier than thou attitude. We see even amongst spiritual practitioners, some of them try to have, there's another saying in English, a one-upmanship. One-upmanship means, you know, somebody says something. It reminds me of a comedy by Monty Python. There's a thing where everyone's trying to outdo themselves as to how great their suffering was when they were a kid, or something in this comedy sketch. But among spiritualists, among spiritual seekers, people are, you know, they're in materialism. We have this saying in English, keeping up with the Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses, that like if you have a new car in your driveway and your neighbor, you know, sees that, then he becomes envious, and then he has to have a new car, a better car. You know, you have a Volkswagen, he has to have a Mercedes or something like that. So there's competition in the material world for more sense gratification, more knowledge, whatever it is, whatever people consider to be opulence. There's competition. So in the competition, there's for material things. Then sometimes people, they take the spirituality. When they take the spirituality, you find the same sort of thing going on, the same sort of rat race. You have somebody wants to somebody wants to be spiritual. Somebody wants, then you get envious of that person. He's seems to be so spiritual. You try to be more spiritual. So it's just similar. It's all due to ego. It's all due to ego. So why we should try to be more spiritual than the other person, or we should be envious of another person who's got some level of spirituality. There's a typical story about this in the Puranas about Vashishta, who was a Brahma Rishi, and Vishwamitra wanted to become a Brahma Rishi, and because Vashishta had this wish-fulfilling cow. So I won't go into the whole story, but basically one Rishi was envious of the other Rishi, and he wanted to attain his level of advancement. So anyway, moving on, Ahankara, or this false ego, can even invade spirituality. That's the point, right? Ahankara's expression of ego consciousness is like touching fire. Fire hurts, disfigures, and destroys whatever it comes in contact with. Similarly, the ego, which is the delusive conceptualization of the self, works havoc, or it should be wreaks havoc on the mind, disfiguring and destroying the clear perception of the jiva. What's the clear perception of the jiva? Once again, the jiva is completely dependent on God, completely self-dependent on God. So, the first task of any spiritual aspirant is to identify, observe, and overcome the ego, or the idea of the self. That is, of course, much harder done than just said. Easier said than done, we say. Okay. So, mind not confused by selfish desire, is a quote. For me, there is no purpose in living, another quote. Neither body, another quote. The great abode of liberation. So we have these different quotes. The first one is from Jitanta Stotra, which is from Pancharatra. Right? My mind, which always reposes at your feet, is not confused by selfish desire. In all my births, I desire only to be a Vaishnava. Okay, so that's we're trying. That's a nice prayer. When trying to overcome false ego, we should always think like this, right? Ramayana. Then the next quotation is from the Ramayana. Sita says in Ramayana. So that was Jitante Stotra 113. In the Ramayana 5:26:5, Sita says, "For me, there is no purpose in living. There is no purpose in wealth. Living as I am, in the midst of these demonesses, without Rama, the greatest warrior." So once again, the thought should be only of the Lord and being subservient to the Lord. So there's no purpose. Sita's lamenting. She's saying there's no purpose to my life anymore because I'm in the Shokavana, the forest of Ashok trees, in Sri Lanka, having been kidnapped by Ravana and taken away from Rama, right? Which is, of course, a metaphor for the soul being in the material world, taken away from Sriman Narayana. And then in Stotra Ratna 57 of Yamunacharya, O Lord, neither body nor life nor the happiness coveted by all, nor even the self, nor anything else that is foreign to the glory of allegiance to you, can I, even for a moment, tolerate. Right? So, what did Chaitanya? We can think of Shikshastakam here. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "Yugaitam nimishena." Right? Nimisha means what? Nimisha means a blink of an eye, like a second, an instant. Nimisha in Tamil, the word nimisha means a second. This morning I said to my teacher, I said, "Ora nimisha." Ora nimisha means 1 moment, 1 second, 1 moment. So yugayitam nimishena. Nimishena means that yugayitam, that yuga means a great length of time. Yuga can be hundreds of thousands of years long, right? A second is like a yuga, is equal to a yuga. Like one moment away from you, one moment away from the service of God, one moment away from thinking that I am a servant of God, that I'm completely dependent on God. That is like a yuga. That's like a huge amount of time. So, O Lord, neither my body, nor my life, nor my happiness, coveted by all, nor even the self, nor anything else that is foreign to the glory of allegiance to you, can I, even for a moment, tolerate. I can't be separated from you, even for a moment. Let them perish in 100 ways. This is true, O slayer of Madhu. Madhusudana means slayer of demon Madhu. This is my entreaty. This is what I'm asking for. I don't want to even have one moment separate consciousness from you. And Tiruvai Moli 291, you relieve the distress of an elephant, O merciful Lord. This is talking about the Gajendra Moksha, which is a Puranic story about how the Lord immediately goes to save his devotee. The king of the elephants was in danger. It was in the water, and the crocodile had attached to its leg, has bitten his leg, and he was unable to get free. And so he was, with his last dying breath, he was plucking a lotus flower and wanted to offer it to the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord took mercy on the elephant, took mercy on the crocodile also, and appeared at the place very, very quickly without even getting ready. And they enact this leela in many temples in South India. Even in Vrindavan, they have a wooden crocodile, and they have a lake, an artificial tank, and they do it. They do this leela, Gajendra Moksha. So in Tiruvai Moli 291, it's being described here. You relieve the distress of the elephant, meaning Gajendra. Oh, merciful Lord. If only you would soon set your great lotus feet so red upon my head, the topic of Vaikuntha, great, I shall not raise. Sire, this is all I pray for. Nothing more do I want. Okay, so what Namawar is saying here is he's saying, I'm not raising the question about going to Vaikuntha. I'm not interested to go to Vaikuntha. You hear also this from in Shikshastakam by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even if you crush me by your embrace, you'll always be my Lord birth after birth. So here he's saying, I'm not even going to raise the topic of moksha and Vaikuntha, but all I want is I want you to please very soon place your lotus feet on my head, which means I want to be surrendered to you, which means I want to serve you, so I want to serve you here in hell, or I'll serve you here and there in heaven. That's fine, either way. But you are so merciful that you saved the elephant Gajendra. So I'm asking you, please, please save me. Please allow me to worship you. Please allow me to serve you, which is my constitutional position. And that's what I want. And I'm not going to even bring up the whole moksha Vaikuntha issue. Nothing more do I want, what he says. So anyway, coming to the next sutra. Indulgence is prescribed sense gratification. So, is like taking poison directly. Indulgence in prescribed sense gratification is like taking food mixed with poison. Okay, so here is explaining about sense gratification in this material world. He's saying there's two words in English. There's prescribed, and proscribed. So first of all, he's talking about what is proscribed. Proscribed, if something is proscribed, it means it's forbidden. If something is prescribed, it means you can do it, right? So sense gratification, which is proscribed. What does he mean by proscribed? In the scriptures, there'll be some rules. There'll be some rules in the scriptures that says, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other, like that. That is, if you do those things, that is like taking poison directly. Just drinking poison. But indulgence in sense gratification, which is prescribed. There is prescribed sense gratification. There's dharmic sense gratification. Even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, what does he say? He says, karmosmi bharatarshava. Karma asmi. I am sex, or I am desire. I am love. Yeah. Karmoshmi bharatarshava. But it is dharma viroda bhuteshu. Dharma viroda bhuteshu, which is according to dharma, which is not against dharma. Viruda means against. Viruda dharma is against dharma. So sense gratification which is against dharma is forbidden in the scriptures. Sense gratification which is according to dharma is there in the scriptures. It's still there, right? Because there are four goals. There are four what we call purusharthas. Purusha means a person or a human being, and artha means goal or a gain, right? So purushartha, the word purushartha means a goal of human existence. So there are four goals. Those goals are dharma, artha, kama, moksha. And usually they're told in that order, but we can say artha or kama, sense gratification, artha, economic gain, right? Or gaining something, right? Karma, artha, dharma means religiosity or righteousness, and moksha. Moksha is the ultimate gain, is the ultimate goal of human existence, like that. So here we understand that one of the aims of human existence is karma, is sense gratification. Everybody needs some sense gratification, needs some economic development, some gain. They have to gain some things just to keep body and soul together. We have to get food, we have to have shelter, we have to have water, we have to have air. We have to have all these things. And everybody wants to be thought of as being righteous, as not being a liar, not being a cheat, not being have all these bad negative qualities. Some honest person. Everybody wants to be thought of as an honest person. And ultimately, all those other things are subsidiary to moksha. Everybody wants to get out of this material world. Okay, so the shastras are there, and we talked about the different shastras in the beginning of Sri Vacana Bhusanam. We talked about the Vedas are there, and then there's, to explain the Vedas, we have the Itihasas like Ramayana and Mahabharata, and we have the Puranas like Vishnu Purana and Srimad Bhagavatam, and we also have mainly the Sattvic Puranas. Then we have the Dharma Shastras. So in the Dharma Shastras, like Manusmriti and Parasura, Smriti, whatever it is, we have different rules and regulations for different societies. Ancient Indian society or medieval Indian society, used to follow some of these rules. We don't know if they followed all the rules, but anyway, they're codified. So those are prescriptions and proscriptions are in those rules, mostly in Dharma Shastra. And we can see in the other books in the Puranas and the Itihasas, we can see how those, in the stories, how those rules were followed or not followed by certain people and what the results were. So again, here there's prescribed sense gratification, stuff that you can do in the scriptures. Legal, let's say legal sense gratification. Then there's illegal sense gratification against the scriptures, right? So they're described here as being the proscribed or illegal sense gratification is considered just taking directly poison, whereas indulgence in the prescribed sense gratification is like taking food mixed with poison. Slightly better, right? It's not good to drink poison. It's also not good to eat food mixed with poison. The result will be the same, is the point. The point being made here is the result will be the same. Succumbing to the glamour of senses and indulging in forbidden activities leads one to suffering, lower births, and to hell. Engaging in permitted pleasures will not lead to negative states of being, but is in fact more harmful. All pleasures are mixed with suffering. This is the fundamental human experience, and all indulgences ultimately end in separation from object and or state of enjoyment, and to subsequent suffering. Permitted indulgences are only more subtle in their effect. The teaching is also important in terms of modern socio-religious politics of sexuality in the West, and this is Rama Ramanujacharya writing here, I guess, where sexuality is characterized by a sliding scale. Heterosexuality on one hand and homosexuality on the other, which is with the resulting moral and social tensions and conflict. I would say that that sliding scale is, it's not just heterosexual to homosexual, but there's all sorts of gradations on this sliding scale of social understanding of sexuality. But not we're not just talking about sexuality here. We're talking about all types of sense gratification. So he's writing something about that. So from the point of view of spirituality, all forms of sensuality or sexuality, vishaya sparsham, are hindrances. Okay. So moving on, seeking, I think it's pretty clear, seeking abiding happiness through sense gratification is like attempting to quench thirst by swallowing burning fire, or trying to find shelter from the sun under the shadow of the hood of a dancing cobra. Interesting illusion here. Okay, so obviously you're not going to quench your thirst by eating hot coals. And you're not going to get out of the sun or get any shade by trying to be underneath the hood of a dancing cobra. Which it reminds me, this is an interesting example, because it reminds me there's a place in South India called Sringeri, which is in the mountains just above Udupi in southern Karnataka district, Dakshina Kannada district of Karnataka. And is a place of one of the 5 places where the main Shankaracharya mats are, Sringeri Mat. So Shankara went there, and when he arrived there, there's a river, and he thought, this place seems very peaceful. Then he saw a frog next to the river and a cobra shading the frog from the sun. So the sun in India, of course, is very intense. You know, not like in some countries we want to get out in the sun and we want to take as much sun as we can because there's not a lot of sun or not a lot of heat in those countries. But in India, which is a hot country, staying out in the sun for a long time can be very detrimental, because the sun can be very, although the sun also gives health and we need to be in the sun to be healthy, but still, too much sun can lead to heat exhaustion, sunstroke, different types of bad diseases and things. So this frog is an aquatic animal, semi-aquatic animal. It can go on the land, it can go in the water. So it needs to stay sort of wet, so it can't stay in the sun for too long. And so it's out on the bank, and the cobra, though, is a natural enemy and eats the frog, kills and eats frogs. So this Shankaracharya saw this cobra was like acting like an umbrella over the frog. So he thought, this is a perfect place to build a temple and to have an ashram and to practice meditation, because it's so peaceful that even natural enemies are peaceful together, this frog and cobra. And in fact, if you go there today, you can see the Shankaracharya of Sringeri. Sometimes he sits on his asana, on his big throne, his pitam, and the deer there are so tame that they will come in and he'll be sitting on his asana. There's pictures of him just petting the deer next to his asana. It's a very, very peaceful spiritual place. So once again, this is just an example. The example given here is, if you wanted to get shade, lying underneath the spread hood of a cobra snake, when it rears up on its end, it opens up its what is next to its neck is like a hood, and it sort of it shows it makes some shadow, I guess. But anybody who's ever dealt with cobras, we used to deal with cobras when we lived in Vrindavan in the Goshala. Sometimes they get in at night, and we'd have to get up and we'd have to get the cobra out or kill the cobra. because they're very dangerous to be in with the cows. Okay, so anyway, that's the example. The basic human problem is suffering or dukkha. This is also what the Buddhists say. Buddhism's a very popular religion. And why is it popular? Because it deals with the root cause, the root problem that we have in this world. And the root problem that we have in this world is suffering or dukkha. Hinduism also deals with it, but in many roundabout ways. The Buddhists go straight to the heart of the matter, and they say that life is suffering, everything is suffering. The difference is that the Buddhists believe that the goal is just to simply get rid of the suffering. The goal is not any positive type of pleasure, but the goal is just simply to extinguish, or what they call nirvana, extinguish the suffering. Right? Sometimes you see there's a story, somebody's being tortured or somebody's in great pain. They're in so much pain that they say, no, just let me die. Just let me die, just extinguish the pain. I just want the pain to be taken away. I don't need to even get well anymore. I know it's impossible for me to get well, so just let me die. So this is the idea, suffering. So the Buddhists think like that nirvana is the ultimate. But whereas we have an idea of positive enjoyment, right? The soul is meant for positive enjoyment. That enjoyment, of course, comes only if we, again, remember our nature as eternal servants of the Lord and completely dependent upon Him. And then engaging in His service, we enjoy like Him. And the example we can give of that is just like you have a butler or a servant. In your house, you may have a big mansion or a big house, or a rich person has servants. And the servants are there in the house. The servants also live in the house. The servants also eat in the house. They also enjoy the house. So the servants of the Lord, when we go to Vaikuntha, Sri Vaikuntha, we also enjoy Vaikuntha. We also enjoy the service of the Lord. Of course, it was being said here, we enjoy it here or we enjoy it there. It's the same for us. But still, the idea is the service of the Lord is very enjoyable. So this positive enjoyment is not just a cessation of dukkha, is what we're talking about. Dukkha is suffering. So the basic problem is suffering, dukkha. And all forms of sense gratification directed to resolving this problem are ephemeral, right, transient, and insubstantial. This is basically three words which practically mean the same thing. They don't last. It's not a permanent solution, right? It doesn't affect, and I think probably just to give the example of itching a scratch, scratching an itch. So you feel some itching on your body in a certain place and you scratch it. It just lasts for a few moments and then you have to scratch again. Or if you're thirsty, a thirsty person takes a drink. He mitigates his thirst. He quenches his thirst. After quenching the thirst, how long does that last? After another half an hour, after another couple of hours, he has to drink again. Excuse me. It's not a permanent solution. So it's not a permanent solution. By investigating the nature of these pleasures, one sees their illusory basis and then eschews them for the real and abiding happiness found in experience of the Lord. In experience of the Lord. The Lord and His Lord's service. So continuing on, text 185. One who experiences the Lord dies in the world of sensory objects. One who experiences the Lord dies in the world of sensory objects, just as the asunama bird perishes at a loud noise. Right? So an asunama bird is easily captivated by the sweet, gentle music, but drops dead when it hears a sudden loud noise. Right? Sometimes people can be scared to death. Right? So this bird is getting scared to death by this loud noise. So the hunter plays gentle music and then suddenly makes a tremendous din or noise and thus achieves his object of catching the bird. Right? The hunter wants to kill the bird and he attracts the bird with this beautiful music and then makes this incredible noise that the bird drops dead. One who has experienced the beauty of the Lord dies, as it were, upon again receiving input. from sense objects. Okay. So, thus it is said, what is it stated in the Gita? By experiencing a higher taste, one gives up the lower taste. Then, in other words, like if you gave somebody a very somebody's in the prison, someone's in prison, and in the prison sometimes they give you only bread and water to eat. They put you in solitary confinement. They give you only bread and water to eat. So you're eating only the bread and water. So then, somehow or other, you get to a situation where you get more than bread and water. They start giving you proper food. They start giving you proper food and drink. And then, can you go back to eating the bread and water after you have? So the idea is after you have truly come in contact and enjoyed the service of the Lord, if that true enjoyment of the service of the Lord, can you then again go back to this sense gratification, which doesn't satisfy, but only temporarily helps us with these urges that we have in the material world. Anyway, thus it is said, "Would you destroy me?" This is a quote from Tirabai Moli. Again, Namawa says in 699, "My Lord, won't you shorten the interval and bind me in Paramapada to your lotus feet, so large that measured the world?" This is a description of the Trivikrama, the Vamana Trivikrama avatar, who spanned the universe with his 3 steps or 2 steps. Third step was on the head of Mahabali, the Chakravarti, the king. Bali, in the Veda, it says, "Idam Vishnu Chakrame Tredani Dadepadam." Treda means 3. He took 3 steps. First 2 steps, he covered the whole universe. So, won't you shorten the interval and bind me in Paramapada? Take me to Paramapada, take me and bind me in Paramapada to your service there. Shorten the interval of my life, is what he's saying. Right? And then it's very poetic, because he's saying you who measured the world with your 2 steps, right? Please decrease the measure of my life and bind me to Paramapada. In the same way as in this story, the Lord placed his foot on the head of Bali Maharaj, and Bali Maharaj became his surrendered servant, Vaman Trivikrama avatar. And so Namaba is praying like that. See, you gave the mercy to Bali, and give me the mercy also like that. Or do you intend to confound my mind and destroy me completely by keeping me exposed to petty pleasures of the 5 senses? So he's saying, take me to Vaikuntha where there isn't any of this sense gratification. There's only your service. So continuing on, he says in Sutra 187, "The ignorant one obsessed with sense objects is like a non-believer, nastika. The intelligent one, thus obsessed with sensory objects, is like the agnostic, nastika. Okay. So, again, this is very similar to this previous sutra, which was saying the proscribed and the prescribed sense gratification, right? So, it's very similar idea here. You have 2 people. One of them is an out-and-out atheist, right? An out-and-out atheist is a nastika, na-astika, not an astika, not a follower of the Veda, not a follower of the Vedic conjunctions. A non-believer. Here it means a non-believer. Okay, so that person is a total atheist. And that person is obsessed with sense objects, right? But there's also another person, right, who is also engrossed in sense of objects to a certain extent. The Nastika is engrossed in the illegal, in the proscribed sense gratification, and he's a complete atheist. Then the other person is more intelligent. He reads the Shastras, and he is also engaged in the legal sense gratification, in the Shastric, in the prescribed Shastric sense gratification. That person is called an agnostic, astic Gnostic, agnostic. There's people who are out and out atheists. For them, God does not exist. Then there's other people who say, God may exist or may not exist. I don't know if he exists. I have no proof that he exists, but I'm open to it. I'm open to the idea that he exists. Maybe he exists, maybe he doesn't exist, right? But whatever, these are also, we can take it back also to the idea of the person who thinks that by his efforts he can attain moksha without the mercy of God. Whether God exists or doesn't exist, or whether he gives his blessing or doesn't give his blessing or his grace or his mercy, right? If I do this, I will attain that. That is called karmakanda, usually, which means it's a form of Vedic, a Vedic path, which says that no matter what I do, when I do the thing, I must get the result, no matter what. So the Gnostic or a non-believer is one who rejects the authority of the Veda. So you reject the authority of the Veda, meaning rejecting the authority of the Veda, the Itihasas, the Puranas, the Dharma Shastras. If you negate that, if you don't accept that at all, none of that, like that, then why would you follow the prescriptions given in the Veda or given in the different Shastras? You wouldn't follow those things. They wouldn't even regard those things. You probably wouldn't even know about those things. The agnostic in this context is one who is indifferent to the authority of the Vedas, right? The Vedas at best, and one who pays, somebody who's sort of indifferent. Okay, the Vedas are there, the scriptures are there, but I didn't read it, so I don't know what it says. Or at best, one who pays lip service to them, right? The person who looks at the prescriptive forms of sense gratification, the legal shastric forms, and he says, "Oh, yeah, that's fine." By accepting them, but failing to implement the teachings at worst. I'm not sure what he means. Failing to implement the teachings. The teachings of the Shastras are that the certain types of sense gratification are prescribed. They're fine. So failing to implement the teachings at worst, but at best following them, even following them. That person he's being compared here to being somebody who's just agnostic. Anyway, so then continuing on, the simple non-believer can be reformed, but the agnostic can never be reformed. Okay, so what he's saying here is somebody who doesn't believe in God at all, you can argue with him, you can give him so many rationales, and he can come around to believing in God. But a person who says, it doesn't matter whether God exists or doesn't exist. He's irrelevant to my situation. He's irrelevant. That person can never be reformed. This is a very interesting point here. The simple non-believer can be brought around through convincing argument and proper instruction. The agnostic, on the other hand, is basically a hypocrite. Does not need any instruction and is nor is open to any argument. Because if somebody comes to an agnostic and says, I want to prove to you that there's a God, he'd just say, no, it's irrelevant. Maybe there's a God, maybe there's not a God, doesn't matter. The agnostic is saying that he doesn't believe that God can be proved. God cannot be proved or not proved. Cannot be proved, positive or negative. So therefore, I don't need to hear anything about it. Whereas a person who's an atheist may say, oh, well, I'm open to the idea of you giving me some argument about why there would be a God. You might be open to that. Whereas the agnostic here is saying this type of agnostic. There may be some other form of agnostic, I don't know. But this idea of this type of agnostic is he is not open to any argument. These two, conceit and sensuality, right, not only destroy, and what is conceit and sensuality? They're the opposites of what we heard before in the previous sutras. Remember when we were talking about the positive, first of all, we're talking about the positive actions of a soul, and now we're talking about sort of negative actions. The positive actions involve controlling the mind and controlling the senses, right? First the mind is controlled, then the senses are controlled, right? After that, one will attain an acharya. The acharya will give us the Tir Mantram, Om Namo Narayana. Om Namo Narayana will lead us to prapati, is surrender, which is the intermediate means, and the primary means, right? The initial means, and then the primary means becomes later on the Lord. Not even the mantra, not even the acharya, but the Lord Himself becomes the primary means of liberation, right? But it all starts with that, controlling the mind, controlling the senses. So controlling the mind and controlling the senses. Here, the opposite of that is conceit, right, and sensuality. Not only destroy through their essential nature, but also destroy by producing hostility towards the Bhagavatas. The word Bhagavata means simply those who are either devotees or refugees of the Lord, either bhaktas or prapanas. Bhaktas and prapanas are devotees and refugees of the Lord, those who have taken shelter of the Lord. Those two, conceit and sensuality, not only destroy through their essential nature, but also destroy by producing hostility towards the Bhagavatas. This is a very important thing. So even if we, up until now, we've been talking about the effect it has on a person, right? The prescribed and the proscribed, first of all, and the prescribed forms of sense gratification, the illegal and the legal, or ashastric and shastric forms of sense gratification. But it also has another problem, is that it produces hostility towards the Bhagavatas. Why does it do that? Because the person, even if he's following the scriptures, right? So first of all, the people who are total atheists and they're totally against God and all these things like that, obviously they're inimical to the Bhagavatas, to the followers, to the servants of God, to the devotees, and to the prapanas, the refugees. But what about the other people? What about the people who actually follow the scriptures? Okay, these people we call smartas. A smarta is somebody who follows Shmiti. It doesn't mean he's more intelligent. It just means he is follower of Shmiti. A follower of Shmiti, the word Shmiti becomes smart. Shmiti means to remember. Smarta also means to remember. That person who remembers the rules that are given in Manu and follows them. So the Bhagavatas, the Vaishnavas, they don't actually follow all the rules of Shmiti. Yes, there are some in India, some Vaishnavas in India who are very orthodox, and they do try to follow as many scriptural rules as possible, right? But there are some Vaishnava activities that change the way that certain things are done in a Vaishnava way, rather than just in a way following the Shmitis. We gave an example the other day. We were talking about doing the Shraddha ceremony. When you're doing a Shraddha ceremony, you're supposed to invite 3 Brahmins, and those Brahmins have to be treated as representing the Pitris, representing the Vaishvadevas, which means all the Devatas, and representing Vishnu, the Supreme Lord. So when you do that, you have to feed them. And when you feed them, you're supposed to feed them. You cook and you directly feed to them. You're giving this to the Pitris, right? But the Vaishnavas, the way they do it is they cook it and they first offer it to the Supreme Lord, to Srimad Narayana. After it's Narayana Prasadam, they give it to the Pitris, to the Vaishvadevas, like that. So this is not what it says in Shmiti. Shmiti says to do it directly and give the food directly to Pitris and like that. But the Vaishnavas do it in a different way, slightly different way. So that means they're not following exactly what it says in the Shmitis, right? So there are some differences between Vaishnava culture and Varnashrama culture, between the regular followers of Dharma Shastra and the Vaishnavas. There may be some exceptions like that. When somebody is supposed to go and do Sandhya Vandanam at a certain time, morning, noon, and evening. So when the twilight comes in the morning and the evening, when the noon time comes, you're supposed to go, whatever you're doing, you're supposed to drop it, and you have to go and you have to do your Sandhya Vandanam, chant your Gayatri and everything like that. That is stated in Dharma Shastra. But a person who's a Vaishnava, maybe he's fanning. Parasara Bhatta is a famous example. Parasara Bhatta, one of the sons of Kurtalwan or Kuresh, the greatest, closest devotee of Ramanujacharya, right? He was fanning with a chowri, with a yak tail whisk we call chamra. It's a fly whisk, actually, to keep the flies off. It's a symbol of royalty, so it's used in the temple a lot. Fanning the deity in Sri Rangam, Namperumal, right? He was fanning. At that time, the sun was setting, and his friend said to him, "Hey, it's time to go and do Sandhyavandanam. The Shastric rule says you have to go at this time and you have to do Sandhyavandanam. You're a Brahmin, therefore you have to go and do this." Right? And he's performing the worship of the Lord. So he said, no, I'll do this now. Later on I'll go do that. Right? So also we were talking about this as well, that many times people are worshiping in the temple and they have something they have to do in the house or something they have to do according to the Shastra, they have to do their Sandhyavandanam, and they can't go at the right time and do it. So then after they've finished doing the worship in the temple, they go and maybe they arrive home at 10 o'clock at night, which is way after the time when you're supposed to do Sandhyavandanam, and they have to do Sandhyavandanam at that time. Of course, there's a prayaschitta, there's a parihara, there's a way that you can atone for not doing it at the right time, and that is by doing an extra Surya Argya. But in that case, in the evening, it's sort of strange because Surya is not there to offer the Argya to. So in any case, the Vaishnavas, the Smartas, will very strictly stick to the prescriptions in the scriptures. So again, we have prescribed duties. We also have prescribed sense gratification in the scriptures. So they will stick to that. And the Vaishnavas will not stick to that. They will take the service of the Lord over those things, over those rules and regulations, and even over those prescribed sense gratification or legal sense gratification given in the scriptures. So the nature of conceit and sensuality is that both negate the quintessence, again, essence of the Atman, which is, again, being completely subservient and dependent on the Lord. They further obscure the natural radiance of the Atman, of the soul, by producing active hostility towards those who have taken to the spiritual path other spiritual aspirants. So what we see that the Smartas look at the Vaishnavas and say, no, you guys are not following all the rules and regulations. You're not doing your Sandhyavandanam at the right time. You're not doing the Shraddha correctly. You're not doing these things according to the Shastra. You're breaking the rules of the Shastra because you're not following, because you think that the service of Sriman Narayana is so much greater, and therefore you're neglecting these other things. There's a very famous, I'm not sure whether it's by Madhavendra Puri, in the Gaudiya tradition, there's a famous verse that he quotes, and he says, "My Sandhyavandanam goodbye, my morning bath goodbye. I forget about all these things, all these rules and regulations that I have to follow. I'm just thinking of, all I can think of is the smiling face of Mukunda, the giver of liberation, of Lord Krishna." Right? The exact verse doesn't come to me right now, but anyway, the point is, people become obsessed with the lotus feet of the Lord, serving the lotus feet of the Lord. That is their constitutional position, and they forget about everything else. Whether it's legal or illegal, they forget about it. Right? So that's the point. So now we come to the end of that section. I think that's pretty clear. Offenses against the Sangha. Okay, so even in Buddhism, they have this idea of Dharma, Sangha, and Buddha. Sangha means association, right? We also use the word gosti in Sanskrit. Gosti means a bunch of Vaishnavas or Brahmins, getting together and perhaps chanting together something. So we say Sangha. Sangha means coming together. Sangha. The last, just to finish off the last section, the idea is that those persons who are atheists are inimical towards the Bhagavatas, and even those persons who are not atheists, people who are maybe smarters, who are following strictly the prescribed rules and regulation and sense gratification given in the Shastras as okay, these people also can become inimical to the persons who are doing property. And we find this, there are people who do karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. There are other Vaishnavas, and they're fully engaged in their efforts of doing, self-efforts of doing karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, and they become inimical to the Prapanas because sometimes the Prapanas don't appear to be following as much as they are. Right? We find this also even amongst different Bhagavatas, even amongst different people. We think, why that person is not doing what I'm doing? I'm doing so much. I'm doing all these things like that. That person's not doing that. So they criticize. He's doing very little. So why how will he get there's a famous story about the cobbler. Probably used to tell the story about the guy who was making shoes, was fixing shoes, and he was sitting underneath a tree. And there was a great pundit. There was a great pundit who used to walk by and used to criticize him. Look, this is a lowly person who has to work with leather, which, he's a unclean, unfit person, contaminated person, because he has to work all day with leather, and he's a very low class, makes very little money, doesn't have any knowledge, right? But he had great devotion for the Lord, that cobbler. Whereas that other person was full of, what did it say up here? Conceit and sensuality. So his conceit, the conceit of the pundit, right, was that he was so much greater than the cobbler. But when Narada talked to both of them, the pundit wanted to know from Narada. They both wanted to know about Lord Narayana in Vaikuntha, because Narada goes back and forth, from these different places. So he said, well, when you go to Vaikuntha next time, can you please ask Srimad Narayana when he's going to bring me to moksha? This is the story. So the pundit thought, because I put great efforts into my jnana yoga, study of shastras, I know everything, and I put great efforts into whatever he was doing. I'm a very qualified, high-class person, and I've done so much. So surely Srimad Narayana is going to give me moksha at the end of this lifetime, or very soon, within a very short time. And the cobbler was very humble, but he understood his true position as a servant is completely dependent on the Lord. So, first of all, Narada came back and he said to the Purohit, he told him, the great pundit, the great scholar, he told him, actually I saw Srimad Narayana, and he said, after maybe 3 or 4 births, you'll attain liberation, or whatever it is, like that, or whatever the number he gave. And the guy was insulted. He thought, wow, he's not giving me liberation after this very birth, because I'm already, I've done so much, I've studied so much, and I've done so much karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, whatever it is. I've performed so much effort to attain liberation. I mean, the Lord should be, giving me this moksha right away. And so he couldn't understand this. So he thought, wow, he began to doubt, has Narada actually gone to Vaikuntha? So maybe he's just lying to me. Maybe he never went to Vaikuntha. He never talked to Narayana. And so he said, okay, so to prove that you actually went there and talked to him, because it sounds like a suspicious answer, because I should be going to moksha quicker than that. So to prove you went there, tell me what he was doing. And so the Lord had told Narada in Vaikuntha, he told him, if they asked what I was doing, tell him I was threading elephants through an eye of a needle, which is actually, possible for God, but not possible for others, right? So anyway, it's a sort of a strange thing to say, but Narada told, this is a story, Narada told this to this Purohit, this great scholar. And so then he doubted. He doubted what Narada said. He doubted that Narada had gone to Vaikuntha. He doubted that the Lord could do this. So that shows that all his knowledge was actually useless. He didn't really understand that God is able to do anything. So he wasn't, but he became satisfied that Narada hadn't gone to Vaikuntha and that he didn't know what he's talking about, and he just continued doing his karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, whatever he was doing his efforts like that. Whereas the cobbler had complete faith like that. So when he heard that God was putting elephants through the eye of a needle, he said, "Oh, the Lord Supreme. He's able to do anything. He can do anything. So I can totally accept that. And by the way, Narada said, by the way, the Lord said that you will go to Vaikuntha, you'll go to moksha, told the cobbler. After the number of births as many as there are leaves on this tree. Right? So the big tree with lots of leaves. The cobbler was actually very happy with that. He was fine with that. He was happy with that. Whenever God wants to give me moksha, that's fine. After so few births, he was thinking, there's all these thousands of leaves on the tree. He was thinking, wow, this is the great mercy of the Lord that after only a few million births, I'm going to get moksha. Like he was thinking that's great mercy, right? Whereas the priest was thinking, the big pundit, the big scholar, he was thinking that, I should immediately be given liberation. But the cobbler wasn't thinking like, he was thinking very humbly. And so he said, Lord Srimanarayan is so merciful, like that. And there's also, we used to do this play sometimes. And there's another part that you can add to the end of it like that the autumn comes, the winter comes, and all the leaves fall off the tree and there's no leaves left on the tree, which represents that the cobbler will go to Vaikuntha, he will go to moksha at the end of his life. So it's a very nice story. But it gets to the heart of the matter, talking about one person has, even though the person may be a devotee of the Lord, maybe following bhakti yoga or karma yoga, jnana yoga, one of these paths of effort, self-effort, but is so conceited that he thinks that his efforts are the thing which is saving him. Whereas the prapana is not thinking like that, shouldn't be thinking like that. So, offenses against the Sangha, right? So now that we understand that these people who are agnostic, atheists and agnostics, or as described in the previous section, might be inimical to the Bhagavatas, the followers of Sriman Narayana, either the Bhaktis or the Prapanas, right? Then we should talk about that, what that means. What does it mean to be offensive to the Bhagavatas, to the other Vaishnavas? Like that. Those who, having name and form, go about obstructing Bhagavatas are like burnt cloth. Okay? So, having name and form, nama rupa, can be interpreted as those who are spiritualist aspirants. Having name and form. So they have a name, Krishnadas, they're wearing tilak and dhoti and everything like this, and they have the form. They look like they're great devotees of the Lord, right? So in name and appearance only, but are in fact obstructive to true spiritual development and service. Or it can mean simply ostentatious people who are preoccupied with external appearance and status. So we have two types of people, right? We have the person, if you look in Vogue magazine or you look in some other, just go in any street of any major city in the world, you'll see people wearing clothes and being ostentatious, looking good, trying to look better than the other person, very, very, very obsessed with their external appearance and their status in society. Excuse me. Okay, so those you have even atheists who are like that. Okay, but then you also have spiritualists, so-called spiritualists. You have in the Roman Catholic Church, you have all these people, the Pope and the bishops. They're all wearing these ostentatious robes and carrying huge, silver staffs and big hats and all these sort of things. They're also appearing very ostentatious, and they're also very proud of their status, right? The spiritual status, the status amongst spiritual aspirants. So these people are they're compared to burnt cloth. When a folded sari is burnt, it appears to be whole, but it is easily scattered by the wind. Okay, so when you burn some cloth, but it's not immediately apparent from the outside. So this is the idea that something might be very beautiful from the outside, but on the inside, there's some problem. There's some problem there. So we all have to guard that. There's even when I went to school, our school had a Latin motto, "Esse quam videre," which means to actually be, rather than just to seem to be. Don't be a show bottle. Don't be on the outside. You're a Vaishnava. You're a great person. You're a great spiritualist or something like that. But somehow or other inside, you're burnt cloth. You're a burnt cloth. So like this. So from the outside, it seems to be fine, but somehow or other it's burned inside, and therefore, when the wind comes, easily scattered. So the jir, when he says here jir, he means non-jir. Non-jir is, of course, the person who was called Vedanti, who was in Melkote, who was an Advaitin, who was converted to Sri Vaishnavism by Parasara Bhatta. Parasara Bhatta went there and converted him, and then later he took sannyas. Sannyas in Tamil is sometimes called Jir or Jir Swami. So non-Jir means my Swami, my sannyasi. So Parasara Bhatta, when he saw his disciple, Parasara Bhatta was a grihastha. When he saw his disciple, who was a sannyasi, coming close, and he could see him from a long distance off. Because why? Because the sannyasis wear different color clothing than everybody else. Everybody else is wearing white, and the sannyasis are wearing this saffron color or orange type color, deep red, bright red, let's say. And then he could see him from a long distance off because of the color of his clothes. So he'd go, "Oh, here comes my sannyasi, my disciple who's a sannyasi." So he became known as non-jir, my sannyasi. So this person is one of the member of the Guru Parampara. He had a disciple, very famous disciple, Nam Pillai, which means Nam Pillai means our son. These are all the Tamil names of the Guru Parampara, which we already discussed at the beginning. So here's a quotation from Nanjir. All the mighty tasks performed by the incarnations of the Lord demonstrate intolerance for the offense to Bhagavatas. And the immediate one that comes to mind is, of course, Prahlad. Prahlad was a Bhagavata. He was a devotee of the Lord. And his father tried to kill him because he was a devotee of Sriman Narayana. His father, Hiranyakashipu, tried to kill him in so many ways. And so the Lord came to protect Prahlad as Narasimha. Now, this is also a definition of incarnation we get from the Bhagavad Gita. It says, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chiduskritam dharma samstapanataya sambhavami yuge yuge. Yuge yuge. So yuga after yuga, time after time, I come, the Lord says. The Lord says he comes, right, to Paritranaya sadhunam, to save the sadhus, the good people, and vinashaya, to destroy the miscreants, to save the suras and to destroy the asuras, right? In the Veda it said, pasyanti surayaha. In Vaikuntha, there's only suras. There's only devotees. Only the followers of Sriman Narayana. But here we have two classes of people. Basically, you can divide everybody into two classes. Good and bad. Suras and asuras. So here we're talking about offenses committed towards the suras, the people who are devotees of God. Now, of course, if somebody has the realization that everybody is a devotee of God, if somebody is very advanced spiritually, then he will not want to offend anybody at all. He won't want to offend anybody. But we do make distinction between people who are atheists, people who are agnostics, people who are strict followers of Dharma Shastra, but not very devoted. Other people who are more devoted, but still feel that they're that their own individual efforts are more important, and then the people who are completely dependent, who are who have felt that they are completely at the mercy of the Lord, and they're taken refuge. They've become refugees at the feet of the Lord, Prapanas. So there's some different grades there of different types of people like that. But ultimately, we don't want to offend anybody. But offending the people who are more advanced, right, like the guru, or like the great acharyas, or the great devotees, the great Prapanas, this is more offensive. And therefore, Prahlad is a great devotee. So even a devotee from before birth, his mother was in the ashram of Narada Muni, and he heard while he was in the womb of his mother, Kayadu, he heard all the different mantras like Om Namo Narayanaya, the Astakshara, and even before birth. So he heard, and he also heard about the pastimes of the Lord and all these sort of things before he was even born. So Nanjir's saying is part of an oral tradition. He's reported to have declared that although the Lord could destroy all evil by mere will, right? Sometimes people ask this question: why does evil exist? If God is all good, why doesn't he just if God is all good and he's all powerful, why doesn't he just rid the world of all evil? Right? During the Holocaust, some of the rabbis, seeing people being taken off to be killed, they said God does not exist. They lost their faith because they saw that there's evil in this world, and they had so much faith in God that he's great, that he's supreme. Why doesn't he get rid of evil? So he is reported to have declared that although the Lord could destroy all evil by mere will, he actually manifests himself in this material realm. These are different avatars, these different incarnations, and perform mighty tasks such as engaging in dual combat with Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, etc. Right? Simply to demonstrate his inability to tolerate an offense towards those who have taken refuge in him. What was discussed before? The whole Mahabharata war. The whole Mahabharata war. How many people died in the Mahabharata war? The whole Mahabharata war was because Draupadi was offended. It all came about by the offense against the devotee, like that. And even the Pandavas were not free from the crime, because although they didn't personally offend her, they didn't also fight for her. They didn't try to stop her being offended by being disrobed in the assembly of the Kauravas, right? So everybody is to blame. You can be blamed for an offense, a direct offense. You can also be blameworthy by not doing anything if somebody else is being offended. If some great Bhagavata is being offended and you don't do something about it, if you're able to do something about it, you can also it's called sin of commission and sin of omission. Sin of commission means you commit a sin. Like Shishupal, you just criticize Krishna 100 times, he'll cut your head off. Or the sin of omission, where you don't do anything and something happens, something bad happens. You know that something is going to, some mistake is going to be made, some sin is going to be performed, you don't stop it. If you have the ability to stop it, you should not allow the great Bhagavatas or the great devotees to be blasphemed or to be offended. Right? The Lord doesn't. This is one of the things in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. They say there are 4 sampradayas, and Chaitanya took 2 things from each sampradaya. One thing that they say he took from the Sri Vaishnava sampradaya is this understanding that the worship of the Bhagavatas is greater than the worship of the Lord. The worship of the Lord's devotees, right? Aradhananam sarvesham vishnu maradaram param tasmat paradaram devi hariyanam saacharam, that they say that this is a conversation between Shiva and Parvati. Most of the agamas are conversations between different people a lot of times between Shiva and Parvati. Shiva is a great Vaishnava, right? If you die in Kashi, Shiva is going to chant Ti Rama Jaya Rama Jaya Jaya Rama in your ear, Ram Taraka mantra, and you're going to go to Vaikuntha. But he's always saying Rama Rama Rami Ti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Rama Nama Varanane. He's always chanting Rama Rama Rama. Shiva. He's considered one of the Mahajans, one of the great devotees, one of the great Vaishnavas. Okay, so the Bhagavatas are greater. They're considered greater than the Lord. So there's two things. There's what we call Bhagavat Apachara and Bhagavata Apachara. So you'll hear Sri Vaishnavas use these terms. I want to explain these terminology, right? We've heard the word aparada. Aparada means an offense. Aparada. The word apachara also means offense, right? Apachara. So Sri Vaishnavas tend to use the word apachara. So there's Bhagavat Apachara and Bhagavata Apachara. So what is a Bhagavat? Bhagavat means the Supreme Person, Sriman Narayana. Bhagavat. Bhagavata is the person who worships Bhagavat, who is the devotee or the refugee at the feet of Sriman Narayana. So there's Bhagavat and Bhagavata. So when you do a Bhagavat Apachara, it means you commit an offense to God. If you do a Bhagavata Apachara, the Bhagavat Apachara and Bhagavata Apachara. If you do a Bhagavata Apachara, that's an offense to somebody who is a devotee or surrendered to God, a Prapana. That is considered worse than doing a Bhagavat Apachara, because the Lord takes the time. He takes his own time. He takes time to come down and to incarnate, to specifically stop this from going on, from people offending Vaishnavas so he destroys the miscreants and saves the Vaishnavas. Paritranaya sadhanam vinashaya chidaskritam dharma samstapanataya. So first, Paritranaya sadhanam. Most important, that this is the definition of an avatar, Bhagavad Gita. Number one, first thing you say is the most important thing. Paritranaya sadhanam. Protect the devotees. Secondly, destroy the miscreants. Right? That's secondary. He doesn't have to destroy the miscreants. He doesn't always destroy the miscreants. Right? But he has to protect the devotees first. Secondly, destroy the miscreants. The third thing in this order, dharma samstapanata, establish religion, establish religious principles. That's the third thing, right? So this is the definition of avatar. If somebody's an avatar, he's doing those things. He's protecting the devotees from offense. He's destroying the miscreants, which is also may come as protecting the devotees, right? And he's establishing principles of religion. Establishing principles of religion, one of which is don't offend devotees and don't accept miscreants or don't associate with miscreants. So here, he's saying that his inability, the Lord's inability to tolerate that offense. Okay, so continue on. Sutra 193. Act of contempt. Act of contempt. This is a quote from Mahabharata. Ashramedha. Ashramedha means a sacrifice, say horse sacrifice. Okay. Ashramedha Parva. Ashramedha Parva, that comes after the Battle of Kurukshetra, when Yudhisthira was establishing himself as the emperor of the world. So they had a big Ashramedha. They had a big Ashramedha ceremony. That when you establish yourself as an emperor, you have to send a horse out for 1 year. And where the horse is allowed to go anywhere and everywhere and feed anywhere and everywhere. And if anybody stops the horse, that means he's challenging the king's horse or the emperor's horse. And therefore, he has to challenge the emperor. But if the horse is just left to graze anywhere and everywhere, that's fine. No problem. That's how an emperor establishes that he is emperor of all these particular lands. So in this particular part of Mahabharata, Krishna is saying to Yudhisthira, Whatever affection you've developed towards me, let that be always be directed towards my devotees, my bhaktas, my prapanas, those who've taken shelter of me. Any act of contempt towards them negates all accumulated merit. Negates all accumulated merit. So these people who think that they're achieving something by their own efforts, whether they be materialists or whether they even be spiritualists, it all gets negated. It all gets negated by 1 ounce or one small piece, one small offense or one small slight towards the devotees or the prapanas, the refugees of God. Offenses against devotees are of many kinds. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the different kinds of offenses, right? One of these is about their birth. This is a good one to discuss amongst those people who are not even born in India. Inquiring about the socio-demographic background of a person who has taken refuge with a view to readjusting one's attitude towards him or her on the basis of being highborn or lowborn, wealthy or poor, educated or uneducated, etc., is considered by Pila Lokacharya as a heinous crime. Heinous, horrible, bad, very bad crime. Good crime. There's no good crimes, but of course, obviously, there are worse crimes and there are lesser crimes. This is a very bad one. This is the most heinous crime. All members of the spiritual family, kutam, are to be treated on an equal basis. Right? We should not look for some material defect in a devotee or in a prapana, in a person who's serving God like that, and especially not according to caste considerations. Okay? So some people will say this is against Varnashram. This is against Manusmriti. This is against the Dharma Shastras. The Dharma Shastras say there's all the there. Come on, there even the Vedas say that Brahmanosya Mukhasid Bahu Rajanyakutaha Uru Tarasyad Vaishaha Padbhyam Sudro Ajayata. There are 4 types of people: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras. There are these different types of people. There are different castes, right? And so, what's wrong with discriminating by caste? What's wrong with this? But when it comes to Bhagavatas, when it comes to the persons who are Vaishnavas, the persons who are devotees of the Lord, who are refugees at the feet of the Lord, to be doing service to the Lord, direct service to the Lord, there shouldn't be any class or gender or different types of discrimination that there is. There's so many types of discrimination, and all these material forms of discrimination should be given up because they're all offensive, right? So again, what does Bhagavad Gita say? Brahmani gavihastini sunichaiva svapakicha pandita samadarshanaha. A person who has actual knowledge, a pandit who is actually really intelligent, sees a cow, a dog eater, an elephant, person, a chandala, all the same, because the soul is the same within, right? And so the soul is the same within. And what is the essence of the soul? The essence of the soul is he's a servant of God. He's completely dependent and completely at the service of God, right? Servant of God. So if you see everybody like that, then how can you discriminate? Everybody's like that. This indeed is more vile than reflecting on the material composition of the Archavatar. There's a famous Sanskrit verse which also Arche Vishnu Shiladi, and I don't remember the rest of it, but we can look it up and I can get it to you. And it describes all these things that you shouldn't, that are offensive mentalities. And if you look at the deity in the temple as being just simply a stone or a piece of metal or wood, right? And not being the exact Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Narayana, then that is also similarly offensive as to looking into the birth situations of different proponents. Like, oh, this person was born in, Australia. This person was born in America. This person was born in a different part of India. Whatever. The Archavatar is the sacred icon or deity in which the Lord resides within the temple. We have Archa Vigrahas also sometimes in the house. Accepting the principle of transubstantiation, in which the icon is transformed through the Lord's grace into his living manifestation, one should not then reflect upon the composition of the icon, whether it is gold, silver, stone, wood, clay, etc., with a view to being judgmental. So again, I think I told the story before. There's a story about Ramanujacharya, that he was walking through the streets of Sri Rangam, which are quite dusty. And some of the children were playing, and they collected up the dust, and they made a sandcastle type of situation. They made a deity of Ranganatha out of sand. And they were playing at offering sand prasadam, offering sand boga, sand food offering, Naivedyam, to the sand Ranganatha, and offering arti to the sand Ranganatha. They were imitating the play they were imitating not the play, but they were imitating the actual worship of the Lord Ranganatha within the temple. And when people were passing by, they would say, here, please, take some prasadam of Lord Ranganatha. We've just offered this sand prasadam to our sand Ranganatha. Please take some sand prasadam. And people were saying, these kids are playing, that's cool, that's nice, they're playing. But, that was it. They weren't taking much more attention. People were not paying much attention to this, because it's just child's play. Then Sripad Ramanujacharya came there, and he saw the sand Narayana, the sand Ranganatha, and he prostrated, full prostration towards the deity, this sand deity, right? Because the children had so much affection, they're worshipping Lord Ranganatha, they're thinking to worship Lord Ranganatha in the sand deity, that he felt, obviously Lord Ranganatha is going to manifest there. And then when offered the sand prasadam, he took some of the sand prasadam and ate it. This is a famous story. So we should not see the deity in the temple. That's an example of not even in the temple, in the street. But we should not see the deity in the temple or in the house like that as simply being stone or metal or wood. In the installation of the deity, of course, we perform many, many rituals where, with mantras and with different procedures, we try to break down the material elements of the form of the deity, and then recreate them in a spiritual way. Just as when we do worship of the Lord, we first of all do the Bhuta Shuddhi, and we do the same thing for our own body before we worship the Lord, because we should not worship the Lord in this inferior body. We should worship the Lord in a completely aprakrita sarira, spiritual body. We should worship the Lord only in a pure body, because only the pure body is pure enough to worship the Lord, to touch the Lord, the Lord's vigraha, the Lord's form. The Lord's form is also Divya Mangala Vigraha, divine, completely divine and auspicious form, completely one with the Supreme Personality of God. At the very least, we have to understand God is everywhere. So we should not mistreat anything, because God is everywhere. But at the same time, specifically, he's in a specific place and will reciprocate through the deity form, the Archa Vigraha. We've already talked about the Archa Vigraha as being one of the closest forms that we can have to God. The super soul is there within the heart, of course, is very close to us. But these other forms, right? Remember the example was given of sources of water. If we're thirsty and we need water, we have to look for a source of water. So the clouds in the sky are far away, like the Lord in Vaikuntha and the Vyuha forms and things like that. The super soul is even difficult to directly come in contact with, because we can only do that by lots of meditation, and it's like digging a well to get water. But the arch avatar, the deity in the temple or in the house, we can immediately come face to face with him, and it's just like water in the palm of our hand, which we can immediately sip and quench our thirst. So that was also given as an example much before this. So we have to remember that. And so we should also, in the same way that we don't judge the bodies and the status, the material status or social status of a prapana or a devotee, of a bhakta or prapana, a devotee or a refugee of the feet of the Lord. So similarly, we should also not. It's similar to that rule that we don't think that the vigraha, or the form of the Lord in the temple and the house, is an ordinary form. It's an ordinary statue. We don't think like that. We don't call them idols. We don't use the word idol. You can say icon. Icon is a respectful word in English, but in fact, it's the Supreme Lord is manifest there. So those judgments are also considered offensive. So continuing on, it is said in the scriptures that inquiring about the social status of a prapana or a devotee, a refugee or a devotee, is like scrutinizing one's mother's reproductive organs. That's a bit graphic. Like I said, this Arche Vishnu Shila Dir mantra or pramana is there from the Shastras. I'll find it for people. I'll post it later on. That also says that you should not. That it's like if you think that the person had a bad situation from birth, it's like you're looking into the heritage of a person, looking back at their heritage. Oh, look, this person was, the 3 generations back or 4 generations back, they were in Africa, or they were slaves, or they were in service, or they were very poor, or whatever it is. Looking at their family line, and looking at the mother, right, and saying, oh, he had a bad mother, maybe he had a good father, maybe he had a bad mother, or maybe he had a good mother, but the father was no good. So we don't. This sort of discrimination is bad. It's offensive, and shouldn't be done. So both types of investigations are equally reprehensible, and one does not instantly become a karma chandala, an outcast through misdeeds. This quote cannot be traced to any known shastra. Okay. Like Trishanku, who became a chandala through his deeds, and the very sacred thread he wore became a leather strap. Interesting. Trishanku was a king who commanded his preceptor to perform a sacrifice whereby he could physically ascend to heaven. Okay, so Vishwamitra was the preceptor. Trishanku was a chandala. He was born very low class. He wanted to go to Swarga, to heaven, Indra's heaven, but he didn't want to wait until he had a proper birth or to perform pious activities to do it. He just wanted his priest, Vishwamitra, to send him there. It's a Puranic story. So he was scorned by his preceptor and his preceptor's sons. The king, in anger, declared that he would seek out some other preceptor who would obey his command. His preceptor, enraged at this display of infidelity, cursed him, and consequently he immediately became a chandala, or an outcast. Okay, so I believe that this story of Trishanku is that he got Vishwamitra performed a sacrifice, and this guy went in his same body, in his chandala body, he went up to Swarga. But when he was going up to Swarga, the devatas turned him around and sent him back down. They didn't agree that he should attain Swarga or heaven. So this went on up and down, and finally he got stuck about halfway up and down, and upside down even. He got stuck upside down about halfway. So this is the story that he got stuck halfway. So then Vishwamitra created an upside down planet for him to live on. You know, it's a story in the Puranas. You can read it. So a Chandala by birth is eligible to become a Bhagavata at some time. Such is not the case for this type of person. One who is born an outcast can at some stage become eligible to take refuge in the Lord, but one who has been outcast due to malfeasance can never be so eligible. So the point is here, again, we were talking about the atheist and the agnostic. The person who is a complete atheist can be turned into a theist by persuasion or by explaining to them who is God, but the person who is the agnostic, who thinks that God is irrelevant, cannot be saved. Here we're talking about, here he's saying, again, taking us back to that idea that there is legal sense gratification and illegal sense gratification, or there is shastric prescribed sense gratification and non-shastric, against the Shastra, proscribed sense gratification. The person who is a complete atheist and enjoyer, sense gratifier, you know, that person can take shelter of the Lord. But a person who was born in a particular family and became outcast because of his malfeasance, because of breaking some scriptural rules and things like that, is not eligible. That's what he's saying here. That if you become a Chandala, that's the reason why he's giving this idea of Trishanku, because Trishanku wasn't born a Chandala, but he was made a Chandala by his arrogance, by his conceit. Again, we come back to that point, it's conceit. So, anyhow, for indeed, he has fallen after rising. He has fallen after rising. So we look and we see people who have fallen. There are many people who have fallen in spiritual terms. They're atheistic or they're materialistic like that, and they can be saved. But once after having been saved or having turned towards the Lord, if again they fall down, that's considered worse than just the person who is somebody should know better. We should say they should know better, right? A Chandala by birth has hopes of attaining liberation in this lifetime, but a Karma Chandala, he's making a difference between a Chandala and a Karma Chandala. Chandala meaning a person born in a low family. And, you know, we were all born in low families, and just speaking for myself, and we had no idea of the scriptural rules and regulations, of course, so we grew up not abiding by them until we came to understand what they were. But a Karma Chandala here, he's meaning, when he says a Karma Chandala, he's saying a person who was not a Chandala, who knew the rules and regulations in Scripture, who understood perhaps even that he was that he's meant to serve the Supreme Person, right? But then, by his actions, right, commits malfeasance, according to the Shastras, has willingly descended to the depths of depravity, and therefore has no hope of salvation in this birth. Then he says, there's no exception from that. No one is excluded or exempt from punishment for such an offense. Remember what we're talking about here, the whole section has to do with offenses to devotees, offenses against the Bhagavatas, right? Offenses against the Bhagavatas, yeah. He's trying to explain how bad that offense is, right? No one is excluded or exempt from punishment for such an offense. Whoever gives affront to a ward of the Lord, who offends a devotee, right, of whatever social status or order of status, he or she may be advanced or backward, intellectually superior or intellectually challenged, receives the punishment as described above. So the point is here, doesn't matter, you might be a great sannyasi, you might be a great devotee, you might be a great prophet, whatever you are, you might be great, you might be advanced like that. It doesn't give you the right to perform bhagavata apachara, to offend the Lord, the Lord's devotees, to offend the Lord's devotees in this way. And just thinking of them as lower or as lower is an offense, as described above. So now we're going to talk about caste some more. It was said, though they be of the Brahmin caste, highest among folk, in Tirumalai 43, it said, O thou who resides in the great city of Srirangam, even those of the Brahmin caste, highest among folk, though knowing the four Vedas and the 6 subsections. The 4 Vedas are Rig, Yajus, Sama, and Atharva, 4 sections of the Vedas. And 6 subsections are Shiksha, Vyakarna, Nirukta, Chanda, Jyotish, and Kalpa. These are the 4 Vedangas. And we don't need to go into exactly what they are, but today, those are the 6 subsections. Will it seems become outcasts instantly the moment they scorn your wards, the persons who are surrendered to you, who are under your protection, like your devotees or your prapanas, right? So even if somebody's of a high Brahmin caste, highest amongst the folk, even if he knows all the Vedas and all the Vedangas, right? If he offends the prapanas or the bhagavatas or the devotees or refugees, he becomes an outcast. He becomes an outcast. The story of Vainatya and the words of Alwan spoke to Pillai Alwan should be recalled in this connection. Okay, so the first part, in Mahabharata, Udyoga Parva, once there was a Brahmin student named Galva. Having finished his course of instruction under the sage Vishwamitra, inquired what the dakshina or honorarium should be. Vishwamitra replied that he needed nothing and that the teaching had been imparted out of love and in appreciation for the service that Galva had rendered during his studentship. Galva kept insisting, and at last, in exasperation, Vishwamitra, the guru, demanded 800 white horses, each with 1 green ear. In dismay, Galva beseeched Lord Vishnu to come to his aid. Garuda was sent, right, so this is why it says the story of Vainatya. Vainatya means Garuda. Garuda was sent to aid him, and taking him on his back, he began flying all over the world to search for the specific steeds or horses. In the course of their wandering, they came to a remote hilltop where a female Rishika is the feminine version of the word Rishi, right? Sandilya was residing. So a female Rishi called Sandilya was residing. After receiving her hospitality, Garuda reflected how such an exalted person could live in such a God-forsaken and remote place. Immediately, he lost all his plumage, his wings, his feathers. And only after begging her forgiveness for thinking ill of her abode, not even of her, but of her abode. If you think, wow, this person's living in such a dump, right? But he's a great devotee. Could he regain his plumage and fly? Okay, so that's an example of a story from Mahabharata, which just shows how little the offense can be. So he wasn't really even offending. Garuda wasn't even offending this female rishi, Sandilya, he was just saying, look, you live in this God-forsaken and remote place. He was criticizing the place where she was living. That's all. And somehow or other, that was such a great offense that he lost his ability to fly. Second story is about Pillai Pillai Alwan. Though a man of great intelligence and erudition and high birth, was constant in his arrogance and offense against other Vaishnavas. So he was a Vaishnava, but he was offensive and arrogant towards other Vaishnavas. His preceptor, Kuradalwan, right, who we've heard of, Kuradalwan, approaching him on an auspicious day on which gifts are made for the expiation of sins, and requested a gift, right? So his guru, his preceptor, came to him on a day and requested that he give him something because it was a specific day when you give gifts to people to mitigate any sins that you've performed. Pillai Pillai Alwan protested that he had nothing to give, and upon being pressed, made a formal promise that he would never again offend any Vaishnava in word, deed, or thought. Right? So this person said, I don't have anything. I can't give you anything. But he, okay, I'll give you this. I'll promise you that I will not ever offend a Vaishnava in word, thought, or deed again. Right? And he was known as a person who would constantly criticize. Right? Short time later, he nevertheless thought ill, just thought ill. Didn't say anything, didn't do anything. Right? Remember, he promised thought, word, and deed. All three ways. Manasa, Vachika, and externally, and, Bahya. He promised that he wouldn't do these types of offenses towards Vaishnava. But a little time later, he nevertheless thought ill of a particular Vaishnava. Feeling great shame at his inability to fulfill his promise to his guru, he hid himself. His preceptor, being unable to bear the separation, sought him out. So the guru naturally thought, where is my disciple? Where is this person? And told him that he should hide no longer, since his attitude indicated that he had indeed experienced sincere regret and had relented. So this is what we should think. If we somehow or other offend others, specifically Bhagavatas, Vaishnavas, then we should feel regret. We should feel sincere regret that we've done that, and we should stop doing it. We should relent. Right? So we can say, first of all, stop, and next express regret, or at least you have to think, you have to regret it within yourself. Good point. So, association is enough to lead one to liberation, despite the deficiency or even total absence of spiritual learning and religious observances. What's he saying here? Association is everything. So, what do you do? We're talking about offending Vaishnavas. The only thing that will happen to you if you offend Vaishnavas is you will lose the association of Vaishnavas. And the association of Vaishnavas here is said to be everything. Because by the association of those other Bhagavatas, you will attain liberation. Why? Because they will help you overcome any deficiency or even an absence of spiritual learning, right? Or even an absence in yourself of any religious observances. Association with like-minded peers in the pursuit of spiritual development is more important than either learning or observance of religious rituals and practices. It's a very easy point to understand. There are no conditions as to descent, deed, and so forth in this matter. in the matter of establishing association with a Tirukutam sacred family, one does not need to consider that only association with those of a higher caste or those more observant in their ritual obligations or those who are more erudite will be more beneficial in leading one to liberation. All association with spiritual aspirants of any social standing or intelligence would prove beneficial or benefit. So normally, this is very egalitarian here. This is very, very nice, very progressive type of understanding here. Normally we would say associate only or try to associate only with people who are more spiritually advanced than yourself. But here he's saying any association of any Bhagavata, anybody who's a Vaishnava, will be beneficial. Okay. This fact is illustrated by the anecdotes of Kaishiki and Uparichara. In the Kaisiki Purana, we are told of the anecdote of Nampaduvan, an outcast singer, so a bard, a person who goes around singing, who gave a song called Kaisika to a hungry ghost who threatened to eat him. By learning the outcast song, the ghost, who was in fact a learned Brahmin under a curse, regained his original form. This illustrates the idea that the Brahmin benefited from the association with an outcast, because he was a ghost at that point. But anyway, he benefited from the association of this outcast. Upachari Vasu was a king. Uparichara Vasu, was a king who, by his intense spiritual practice, gained the power to fly through the sky with all his retinue. He was asked to arbitrate in a dispute between the gods and rishis over a matter of ritual. Having decided in favor of the gods, he was cursed by the rishis and lost his power of astral travel. This is an example of a highly learned man sliding down with the gods instead of the spiritual aspirants. So even though he was associating with the gods, because he was cursed by the rishis, he lost his power. The price of Brahmanism is acceptable if, as a result of the study of the Vedas and other scriptures, is the attainment of the Lord. If that is not the result, then it is to be rejected. That's very interesting. So, because the question may come, right? The question may come is, okay, if only just associating with Bhagavatas is the most important thing, and we don't need to perform any religious rituals or to study any Shastras and becoming learned in Shastras, then why should we actually study Shastras, right? And he says the price of Brahmanism is acceptable, right? You can become a Brahmin or act like a Brahmin, and that's acceptable, right? Many other people would say it's imperative. It's essential. It's essential. As a result of study of the Vedas and other scriptures, right, is the attainment of the Lord. So if you can attain the Lord by doing those things, then that's acceptable. If not the result, then it has to be rejected. So all of this Brahmanism, right, all of the study of the scriptures, all of the study of the Vedas, like that, it's all acceptable if it leads to attainment of the Lord, or to understanding that we are completely dependent and servants of the Lord, which leads to moksha, which leads to the service, the eternal service of the Lord. Brahmanism is not being denied the eminence due to it. The point here is being emphasized by the learned Acharya is that Brahmanism should result in devotion to Vishnu and the welfare of all beings, particularly those who are surrendered to the Lord. All the devotees are equal, and caste restrictions no longer apply to them. If Brahmanism only serves to increase arrogance, casteism, and hostility towards Vaishnavas of lower castes, then it does not serve any useful purpose. One's descent and ritual of descent, his hereditary, his heritage, and ritual observances do not influence spiritual development or decline. The cause of spiritual development is relationship to Bhagavan or lack thereof. Right. We have many instances of persons in all strata of society having achieved enlightenment and liberation. Therefore, one's birth in a high caste and observance of prescribed rites, like samskaras, do not guarantee spiritual development or liberation. The only thing that can influence our spiritual development and liberation is association with or disassociation with Srimad Narayana. This is all pretty straightforward. If it be asked, is there caste equality amongst those who are in relationship with the Lord? Is there caste equality amongst those who are in relationship with the Lord? All the Bhagavatas, all the Prapanas, they have a relationship with the Lord, they're serving the Lord. So the question then comes, if caste is so insignificant, then is there actually caste distinction between those who have caste? Is there caste equality, amongst those who are in the relationship with the Lord? The answer is, there is not. There's not caste equality. So he's saying caste still exists, right? But it has somewhat of an insignificant, role to play, let's say. The superior birth gives rise to anxiety since there's a possibility of fall, as in, quote, even in my body. The quotation is from Jitante Stotra, see the note on 120. The exalted status of the highborn is dependent upon many socio-religious factors. There is always the possibility of a fall from status occurring due to transgressions of commission or omission. Highborn persons may also consider themselves eligible for following some other means. Upaya antara. Upaya antara means other means. What are the means? The means is the Lord. Primary means is the Lord. Secondary means is property, right? And these other means are means of self-effort like karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, or even people may be even deluded to thinking there might even be other means. And this path, too, is uncertain of success and liable to setbacks and failures. So when somebody's born in a high superior position, has a superior birth, there's always a possibility that he can fall from that. So he has so many things that he has to do to maintain that social superiority. Whereas somebody who's not born there doesn't have to do all those things to maintain his social superiority because he doesn't have social superiority. So it's actually a benefit. Well, we're going to see the next section talks about the benefit of being born in actually a lower caste. Right? This may seem a little bit strange to most people who've read the scriptures. They may think being born in a high class family or high caste is more beneficial. So here we have this next section is talking about the benefit of being born in a lower caste. In order to realize one's true nature, one needs to be of a humble disposition. The true and essential nature of the jiva is enveloped and obscured by the 6 hindrances, known as shad-adi. So shad means 6, and ari means enemies. So these are our 6 enemies. But our true and essential nature as a soul, as a jiva soul, as a jivatman, being completely subservient, dependent upon, and meant for serving the Lord and the Lord only, right? The hindrances to that, right, are kama, self-referent desires, krodha, anger, moha, delusion or identification with the mind-body complex, mada, arrogance or hubris, right? Lobha, not sharing resources with others, and matsarya, malicious envy. These are the 6. All of these have their basis in the delusive identification with the mind-body complex, right? So, in order to realize one's true nature, there needs to be a humble disposition. So humility is important. Birth in lower castes is really better, as it does not entail the 2 defects. What are the 2 defects? Right? And here we say dosha. Dosha is it's not the rice pancake that they eat in South India. Dosha, in this sense, comes from the Sanskrit word dosha, which means defect. So, the first defect is fear of falling from one's caste status. Right? If you're born a Chandala or a Mlecha or an outcast, then you have no fear that you fall down from being a Brahmin because you've already fallen. Right? And 2, the constant need to impose a false notion of oneself, projecting that image that does not belong to the jiva by nature. So again, first of all, if you're born in a low caste or a low class situation, right, you don't have a problem, you don't have a social class to fall from. And similarly, because you don't have that, maybe you also not have this false notion of yourself, projecting an image, show bottle type image that you are something that you're not. For the low-born, abjection is consistent with birth. The ahankara ego sense is the greatest obstacle in spiritual progress and the realization of one's true nature. Those who are high-born are more likely to have an overdeveloped and reinforced ego, whereas those who are born in the lower castes have a less developed ego. They're also used to being exploited and discriminated against, and thus have a more pervasive sense of helplessness and humiliation. This feeling of abjection is the only prerequisite for taking shelter, taking refuge. In the modern context in the West, where caste is not an issue, this teaching can be applied to those on the perimeters of society, those following alternative lifestyle, gays and other groups that are the target of vilification and social discrimination. Okay, so even though we don't have a caste system in the West, or we don't have a caste by birth system in the West, we do still have, in many countries, in many places, we have a caste by it's more like by money, by wealth. You have wealthy different classes of people according to their wealth, and also according to other things. So just like he's saying here, also people with alternative lifestyles are looked down on, right? So whether it be overt type of discrimination against people of different races or religions, or castes or creeds, or different type of lifestyles, or different genders, or different forms of sex. Different approaches to sexuality, whatever it is. There are so many discriminations out there, and so we should not just think that this is only applies to Indians who have this this very strict caste by birth caste system, but it also can be there in any society. There are different classes, and so we have to be careful about that. Right? We can also become haughty, or we can become puffed up, or have our ego puffed up, thinking we were born in a rich country. You know, I was born in a rich country. I was born in a rich family. I was born the son of an aristocratic person, or a person who was very good businessman, or whatever it is, whatever we think, and we can even look down on people coming in other situations, or even look down to people who are born in great families in India, Bhagavatas. So we have to be careful, not only when it talks about caste here, we have to also think of our own situation. In other societies, there are class divisions, and we have to be careful about that. Therefore, birth in a lower caste is better. In order to take refuge and to practice the virtues of unconditional friendliness and compassion, humility and service, it is better to be born an outcast than in a family of great learning, wealth, and status or caste consciousness. The person who is used to being discriminated against will, after having taken refuge, be able to empathize with the empathize with the plight of those who are less fortunate, and will hopefully be more ready to assist and to serve without self-reference. Whereas for one who has been a member of the in-group or mainstream and has always found acceptance and support, will generally be less sensitive to the sufferings of others, never having personally experienced vilification or discrimination. That's very, very clear. So then comes the Sutra, 217. Even one who cooks dogs, O king, swapacho. Pachati means to cook in Sanskrit. Swa means dog. So swapacha means a dog cooker, person who cooks and eats dogs. Possible. Even today there are people who eat dogs, right? Some societies. But in this sense, it means somebody very, very low. Yeah, very, very low. The Bhagavad Purana says, even one who cooks dogs, a Chandala, O king, who has devotion to Lord Vishnu, is higher than a twice-born one. A Brahmin without devotion to Vishnu is lower than one who cooks dogs. However, low be the parentage and social status of a Vaishnava, he is nevertheless superior to a mere caste Brahmin who is devoid of love of God. Shastra reiterates again and again that everyone is born a Sudra. One earns the right to the status of twice-born, Dvijatva, through the samskaras or sacraments, right? Ritual purificatory rites, and through the study of the Vedas. The study of the Vedas should rightly culminate in love of God, bhakti, and the service of all sentient beings, loka samgraha. If this is not the result, then dvijatva, or twice-bornness, right, is useless. So now we get to a section that says, social blemishes are mitigated through right association. The blemishes associated with an inferior birth are mitigated through association with distinguished persons. Distinguished persons are those enlightened Sri Vaishnavas who are free from conceit, selfishness, and deception, and are steeped in love of God and compassion for all living beings, and who strive for the welfare of the entire world, loka sangraha. Once one develops suitability for entering into a relationship with God, then all blemishes associated with one's social circumstances should be eliminated. Right. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about cultivating humility, controlling the mind, controlling the senses, resorting to an acharya, getting the mantra, taking refuge in the Lord through the acharya, by the process of property, which is the initial means of attaining liberation, and then cultivating right association with other Bhagavatas, right, which in itself, that association will mitigate all of these blemishes that we have by having taken birth in an inferior family or in some inferior social situation, right? And hopefully the association of other people, other Bhagavatas, will also get rid of any blemishes we have from taking birth in a high family or a high caste, because we have that automatic false ego of taking birth in a high social status or a high caste, and that should also be given up, and it gets given up by associating with all sorts of other Bhagavatas. not just the Brahmins, not just the high socials, not just the rich Bhagavatas, but with all sorts of Bhagavatas. Once one develops suitability for entering the relationship with God, then all the blemishes associated with one's social circumstances should be eliminated. So, those are all the steps to attain that suitability. And so once we do all those things, right, we get the right association, then all those blemishes from either being born high or being born low, right, will go away. So I just have 3 more sutras to go, and we'll finish there. So once one develops suitability, we did that. Social blemishes and their mitigation are stated in the text. The path of faultless good conduct. In Tirumalai 42 it says, "O you who are well versed in the Vedas and follow the path of faultless good conduct, you should worship together with and give and take on a par with people of low caste, if they are his devotees. O resident of high-walled Sri Rangam, you have graced them to worship on equal footing." So everybody's equal in the service of the Lord. Association with the Prapanas, right, is like iron in relationship with refined gold. An expert alchemist can turn iron into gold through the mere touch of highly refined gold. In the same way, the contact of practicing Vaishnavas can be brought about by a transmutation of being and turn one into a Dvija. So simply by good association, one mitigates all that, and one becomes like a Dvija. So I think we're going to leave it there. We're going to carry on next time from Sutra 222. And if anybody has any quick questions and comments before we log off, you're welcome. Anything that we discussed today or on other days. So thank you very much. Namaskaram.